there is a story that has gone viral about how the sargassum, the sea, if you call it seagrass, that's fine. We'll forgive you. It's seaweed. Not that big of a difference, I guess, if you're layman's terms, is carrying flesh-eating bacteria. That is not true. I feel like I'm saying this over and over again. I'm going through, and every time somebody shares this article that started from a local CBS affiliate, I think in Miami, or NBC, sorry, CBS, that looked at this paper that recently came out, which I read. It's right here, about the potential for Vibrio bacteria development within basically ocean trash caught inside of large algae blooms in the ocean, specifically sargassum. So around here, they call sargassum the June grass. It's not actually grass. It comes in every year. It's stinky for a little while, but it plays a very critical role in nourishing the beach. It provides nutrients, its decomposition creates habitat. You need it. And every year people complain, why are they going to rake it up? No, please don't rake it up. It belongs there. It's supposed to be there. If you rake it up, all of the little ecosystems that are dependent upon the nearshore environment start to collapse. However, the extent of blooms that we have been seeing, and it's called sargassum because it originates out of the Sargasso Sea, are unprecedented, like many things. This is a combination of oceanic temperatures, which we have talked about. It is coinciding with that very hot Gulf that we just talked about. The higher the temperature, the more these blooms are able to go out of control. Mm-hmm. It has to do with the amount of nutrients that are in the water for this stuff to consume and grow, which most of the time is not something that can be controlled on a local or even a state or regional scale. It's a global system. If you think every time you hear about African dust, so based on what is happening in Africa, we can have really bad algae blooms here in Florida.
Yep.
The global climate system. If desertification continues to be exacerbated in the African continent, you're going to see more toxic algae blooms in the Gulf of Mexico. So you can have agricultural runoff that contributes to toxic algae, but we're talking specifically about sargassum. So that stinky stuff that's all over the beaches in Florida right now. The study looked at, and this is not a current observational study, which is the other thing. It's like they did the testing and they pulled it out. They put in cultures. Mm-hmm. They detected certain strands of Vibrio bacteria that were bonding with microplastics within the seaweed to see what the risk of certain Vibrio bacteria would be if it was consumed by shellfish. So are certain protein present that could develop into worse Vibrio strains. And how that trash is playing a bigger role in potential public health concerns if you're, let's say, dragging nets to pick it up and processing it and things like that. So news people, being not educated necessarily in the complexities of oceanic bacteria and science, read this paper and they saw two words and they wrote an article about it. Those two words were Vibrio vulnificus. I've done PSAs about Vibrio vulnificus more times than I can count because it's an issue really in Louisiana, but secondarily also in Florida. Vibrio vulnificus is a type of necrotizing fasciitis, which is super fun to say, super terrifying to get. That is what they're saying is flesh-eating bacteria. It is a Vibrio strain. That is correct. But like how amphetamines you have one molecule difference between meth and Adderall, there is a world of difference in different Vibrio strains. The most present Vibrio strain that they found was the one that causes coral bleaching, which is a huge concern. So instead of actually having articles about how all of the microplastics, which is a specific type of waste, of plastic waste in the ocean, is causing the development of Vibrio bacteria that lead to large-scale coral bleaching, they went the seaweed is flesh-eating bacteria route, which is false. That is not what this article says. In fact, let me pull it up. I'm going to pull up the table in the list right here because this is publicly available research of all of the Vibrio that was identified from their sweeps. Vulnificus is not among them. Cholera is another type of Vibrio bacteria. Not a flesh-eating bacteria, but we all know that cholera is something big, bad, and you don't want to play with it. It's not in this list either. So the two big bad Vibrios that most people think about, vulnificus, flesh and brain amoeba, and cholera, were not actually present. but they're 2 Vibrio strains. So people see that and go, oh my God, it's a flesh-eating virus in the seaweed. The seaweed that's on the beach, and no one in science will ever say anything with absolute certainty, is highly unlikely to have at this point any traces of the proteins that can lead to the potential development of Vibrio vulnificus. This study looked at a specific place at a specific point in time with specific strains of Vibrio, none of which were flesh-eating bacteria. Every time I see that article shared, I'm freaking out. And I've corrected people who have actually come back to me and mansplained things. As somebody who has a master's degree in this field and finished my dissertation or my PhD coursework, wrote a master's thesis on coastal science and environments, worked at the Public Health Agency, and specifically designed things to monitor this particular thing. Dude was like, I'm pretty sure grass isn't supposed to be on the beach. It's supposed to be sand. I got that. That was the response. That was his response. Yes. And I was like, I said, well, I guess you have a very Hollywoodized version of what a nearshore environment and ecosystem is supposed to be like. But what would I know? I only got a bachelor's and master's, finished all my coursework, published a dissertation, a thesis on the subject, and won all these awards for my work, and then ran an office that specifically dealt with this specific problem for 2 years. But sure, what would I know? But there's not right now. And there could be someday. And if people find it and this changes the science as it stands, then that's great. We'll correct and be like, oh, it turns out we did. But as of right now, the paper that they are referencing, which is publicly available, did not detect Vibrio vulnificus anywhere in their cultures. The presence of a potential protein that might lead to, if consumed by shellfish in the near shore, because vulnificus requires a very delicate balance of temperature and salinity. It prefers brackish waters, not straight salt.
Right.
So oysters, things like that. Then if consumed and developed in those other right conditions, could lead to it, is not the same thing. Not is categorically different than saying that a giant blob of seaweed heading towards Florida is rampant with flesh-eating bacteria. And I'll also add this. Look, Florida's failure bodes well for me reputationally. That's the fact. The worse that Florida does, the more I appear to be right. I'm aware of that image. So if Florida's economy tanks this summer while DeSantis is running for president because everybody thinks there is a giant thing of seaweed coming to the state that is rampant with flesh-eating bacteria, that actually helps me. It helps my goals, which is to see DeSantis fail. But as much as I would like that, and my husband said, maybe you shouldn't go out correcting everybody. The fact is that truth does matter. The science on this issue matters. And this feeds this whole kind of environmentalist or alarmist when we allow news media to misrepresent robust and great research. By the way, this was a great job done. I actually contacted the authors by trying to cause fear and panic, for one, about something that is not a real threat, as far as we know. And two, also insulting, they completely blew up the opportunity for us to talk about what the hell we're going to do about these massive blooms that are being caused by increased sea surface temperatures and global mechanisms that are leading to the over-nutrification of oceanic waters and changes in salinity, and B, the massive amount of oceanic waste, not just large plastic, which we mostly know about because we all see the images of trash piles. This is microplastic. These are these tiny little beads and other little particles that are bonding to things like algae, and then these bacteria are developing on those plastics. So those two conversations are now not happening because media read 2 words and decided to run a headline. And these are the literal headlines, and we'll add it to the article that I wrote with this, saying seaweed rampant with flesh-eating bacteria headed towards Florida. That was the headline and I was like, I want to see the article. Now, every time I see any news article about science reports, my first instinct is, A, did they link to the article, which this one did not. I had to go find it. And B, what did the article actually say? And this is exactly why. This paper says nothing. The press release from the university, I think it was FAU, it doesn't say here, I'm pretty sure it was FAU, about this article says nothing about the presence of Vibrio vulnificus, which is the Vibrio that is the flesh-eating virus, necrotizing fasciitis, the really bad stuff you really don't want to play with. And I advise people about that all the time. That's not what this says. And as much as it would be great for me to see Florida crash and burn while DeSantis is running for president, I live here. The people who have their little shops on the coast here are my friends. They were the people who supported me. Their entire life is built around healthy tourism to this area. After BP, a lot of people in the Panhandle lost everything. Because even though the oil spill wasn't as big of a problem for the Florida coast, the fact that there was any presence of it on Florida beaches caused people to cancel trips.
Yeah.
A lot of people. This kind of discussion will cause people across all of Florida beaches. It doesn't even matter if it's the Atlantic coast or not. People will hear Florida beaches, flesh-eating bacteria, and cancel their trips. And there are other reasons you should cancel your trip. A lot of them that are rooted in civil rights violations.
Yeah, like the travel warnings from the NAACP.
And the kidnapping trans children, if you're visiting here. And you have
the equality.
Yeah, all that stuff. But my objective has always been to communicate science accurately and to keep the public informed of what its risks are. And that also means debunking what its risks are not. And I've gotten, there are people who I know don't even have college degrees fighting with me while I'm correcting them on this shit. And I'm linking to the direct paper that one person was in layman's terms, that seems to be what it says. It was Vibrio is a whole species of stuff. And like I said, with meth and Adderall are one molecule apart. Both kind of have they have some overlap. Obviously, there's overlap there because they're based in amphetamine. But cholera is not a flesh-eating virus. Nobody would call cholera a flesh-eating virus because that's not what it does. It's a diuretic. It does a lot of other things to you, and it will kill you if you're not medicated, but it's bacteria, so it's treatable. But you wouldn't mix up cholera and vulnificus. So why are you mixing up coral bleaching and vulnificus? It's because it's sensationalist. It gets people to click. It gets people to retweet. It boosts the people who are sharing it. Newsweek shared it too, and now it's gone viral. And I'm sitting here, that's not what the paper said. That's not what the authors said. That's not what the university said. There's literally one line that says Vibrio is of public concern because of coral bleaching, because of cholera, and because of vulnificus. And that's not the same thing as saying this is what we found.
Yeah.
But of course, I did that one way shorter than I did the other one, but we can probably pull that out and make it its own little rant because it's important to be accurate. I got here. The only reason y'all know who I am is because I was a stickler for making sure that we accurately reported what things are and are not. And this is a bad interpretation. And I would say misrepresentation of really good research. And it's a shame because there's great conversation to be had out of it. Flushing bacteria is not one of them. So the stinky stuff on the beach might stinky, and it can be an irritant to senses. But cases that require actual medical treatment or acute medical treatment are incredibly rare for sargassum. And you should always be careful where you're swimming, especially in brackish waters, not just because of all the things that want to eat your limbs, but the things that will eat your brains. This is not typically the type of year where we see the development or the flourishing of vulnificus because water temperatures are not close to inland where they would need to be. Normally, this is the highest risk at August is when most people see it. July, August, September, when water temperatures are at their maximum. When there's been a lack of rainfall, so it affects the salinity, especially around docks, brackish water ports, where you find oysters, things like that, where they can live and cling. We're not even in the time of year where we normally see that. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but definitely not right now on the beach, not with the sargassum, not according to this paper. Those are the key points. And yes, it's supposed to be there. Not that much of it, but some of it's supposed to be there. But yeah.